Hey guys, this is DFD, aka Dark Frozen Devs, back with another Kamihime project video. Now, there's a few things I do have to mention. There is an in-game news tab that you should probably check out. I'm not going to cover in this video because there's a lot of stuff to go through with it, but it's got a lot of different shop changes, and some of them were getting removed, others are getting added, so you may want to double check what's there because it may or may not cut off your access to some things, especially if you're one of those people that wants to try and complete as much as the library as possible, because we already should have some things taken out of the game as is, like the EXP material items for both weapons and at Dolan's, so it depends on how much you really care about that. But second thing I should mention, it seems that we will be getting raid IDs soon, along with the weekly advent battles. Now, raid IDs means that you can get a code to pretty much use for your raid, and people would just enter that code and directly jump in. No, none of that randomness crap. So that's going to be a pretty welcome addition. Also, should mention that the weekly advents, they're like the advent battles, only they are counted as permanent content, but because of that, it will be just like the epic quests, where you will not be able to get some of the stuff from epic quests ever again. So once you get something one time, there's a chance you won't be able to get any more of it. So you have to keep in mind, like, for instance, I believe Typhon should be one of the first ones. You get the SSR stuff from Typhon, you will not be able to get any more copies after that. So you're just literally stuck with one weapon that can final break and one at Dolan that can hit maximum break. So I have to point that out. You still want to do these, especially if you are a free player or even a newer player, because some of this stuff is very good, and unlike epic quests, these weapons can hit final break. I just briefly mentioned that, so it's going to be worth it. It can also help you get materials that you might have missed. Like, I actually do have a few weapons that I couldn't final break because I had forgotten that I needed extra materials and then couldn't do it. Well, people like me can go back and fix that mistake now, at least with certain advents, so keep that in mind. I've done that with the Typhon weapon, and I do believe the Kyuki bow as well, but quite frankly, I may not end up using the Kyuki bow anyways, because I have stronger stuff at this point. But, anyways, getting into this, and speaking of stronger stuff, in fact, we are currently in the middle of the 7th guild competition, and this is where things are going to start changing for this event, because I will say this out the gate. There is a special mechanic you have to pay attention to, or your score will suffer. So I will go over that when we start looking into this thing. But DMM side, or the JP side I should say, they have gotten a lot further than us, so that's why this is listed as so many of these. Anybody that does look on this wiki, keep in mind that you have to go further down to see some of the older stuff, and you'll see that when I look at it. But as far as I can tell, maximum damage in one turn has not happened since the 5th one, and it probably won't for a long time, so expect a lot of these to end up being total damage you do throughout the entire fight. We have 14 turns to do it this time, and there are helpful, well, they can be helpful enemies, I should say, but again, we're about to go over that. Also, keep in mind, there's different days of the week when everything's open. If you decide to go do this on Sunday, you have access to everything, so probably the best time to do it if you want to just do everything in bulk. Just keep in mind, it should not take any AP to start it, so you can try as much as you want, as long as it's open. Now, going into the 7th one, same stuff applies with Skokun itself. You cannot kill it, no matter how hard you try. In fact, it says its HP does not decrease at all, because of a special buff it puts on itself. Its resistance is standard, so anytime you want to try and debuff it, you have a fairly good chance to do it. However, there's a few catches. Also, it is resistant to attacks other than the weakness attribute. Now, what this means is, if you're fighting something like the Light Skill Coon, and you hit it with anything but Darkness, or Phantom, but you shouldn't use Phantom Element anyway, but if you hit Light Skill Coon with anything other than its weak attribute, you will suffer a huge damage loss. That said, the best way to put it in perspective is this: stay on elemental advantage if you want the best possible scores. There's possibly a few exceptions to this, like if your strongest grid is a lot further beyond your other ones, and maybe it might still do more damage despite the weakness setback. But keep this one major factor in mind: if you do not attack with elemental advantage, you lose 90% of your damage output. To put that in perspective, if I use a light team to hit a dark enemy with this special buff, then they will deal full damage. If I use any other element, then only 1/10 of the damage counts. So while my light team might do, like, say, 1 million damage, the other teams can do the same amount of damage, but it'll get reduced to 100,000 because of that buff. So hopefully I've cleared that up. Get used to this because of the fact that it is going to be on every single guild competition, as well as a few fights further down the line. So you will have to pay attention to that. Namely, it will be on heroic difficulty, but that's some seriously high level content. It's even suggested you be like 75,000 power. And you probably need a very strong grid that hits like 150 to maybe 200% assault and all sorts of other stuff. You will see that special buff on heroic difficulty, and on top of that, there are starting to become Guardian Plus raids on the Japanese side. They are harder than the original ones, and that's one of the mechanics, meaning you will start needing elemental advantage for even that. So this is a clear-cut sign that the game is now shifting into a new era where you need to work on all 6 teams. So if you had done like before, where you worked on only one team, that's going to become a problem. If you're doing it like me, where you did work on one team but started using that team to get stuff for other teams, then you should be fine. Just build up all 6 of your elements. You can still use a main element, but any of these situations where you have that special buff, then you're going to see your damage output suffer. So pay very close attention to that. That's why I mentioned the catch, because the catch about it is that if you have a team strong enough to deal, like, a random example, 2 million damage, but they're dealing 200,000 when this buff is in effect. If your other teams aren't doing 200,000, even the one that has advantage, then it's probably best to use your strongest. So you will have to test it out and factor things in. But keep this one thing in mind: it is a very, very dangerous situation to be in some of the harder fights, because of the fact that your damage output is so low, and half those fights are on a timer. So you do want to pay attention to that. Secondly, this is also where we'll probably start seeing a lot of frequent use of this special mechanic as well. There is going to be cases where enemies are completely immune to debuffs. That does not mean that you can land it no matter how hard you try. This means it will never ever work. In this case, Skill-kun is immune to paralysis. Illusion is actually dizzy on our version. It's immune to frenzy, so you can't do that stuff with Cthulhu or anybody else that might be able to cause frenzy, because I think there's others later down the line. And you cannot increase its charge turns, meaning that Black Propaganda, or BP as it's called, does not work. So you're not increasing the orb count, but you can still take away current orbs. So that means if you use somebody like Mordred, don't expect the orb extend to work, don't expect some of the debuffs to work, but you can remove an orb. Now then, that said, this is just the start of some of these mechanics, like I said before, and they start getting really prevalent in the future content. So you will want to start paying attention to that. And this is the best place to test all of this stuff out, because there is literally no drawback to doing guild competition. You can only get stuff. You do have a risk of failure on other content, so start getting used to these mechanics. Now, sorry about how long that took, but I definitely needed to explain that, and that is something you must pay attention to, or it will seriously get in the way. Especially in some content where slots might be limited, because Guardian Plus actually allows less people than even Ultimate Raid, I do believe, or around the same amount. But I had to break that down. That is very important, especially if you want to maximize your damage output. And this is a competition that is based on that. But going with the rest of this info right here, Skillcoon does have a raging mode, but doesn't have orbs this time around. So even if we were allowed to increase its orb count, it doesn't even matter. And there are two helpers called Skill Measurement Chan. They do have orb counts, which means they do have charge gauges. But here's the thing, attacking them does not add to your score. So if you hit one with, like, say, 1 million damage, you don't get 1 million more points. However, you do have to keep this one thing in mind. Whenever they are hit, their defense is higher. And I don't think it even really matters to begin with anyways, because they don't count towards the score. But there is a special mechanic that goes with this. Now, going into actual information, Skill Measurement Coon, it takes 4.5 million damage to switch modes, more or less. So it takes 4.5 million to go into Raging, and it takes 4.5 million to go into Stun. So you have to pay attention to that. Now, it starts off not doing too much damage. However, it will increase over time because of its buffs. The Skill Measurement Chans, they only do certain things. And I do believe it is based on whether or not you hit it and maybe orb count. But looking at this, there's a more important mechanic that makes you want to hit them anyways. Skill Measurement Coon, it will put attack up on itself and its helpers, and this cannot be erased, period. It will, however, put a combo buff on everybody as well, which is a double attack and a triple attack buff. I can't tell from here if it can be erased or not, but quite frankly, don't really worry about it too much. Buff removal is the least of your concerns in this type of thing. And it does say enemy burst, it will deal damage as a whole to everyone. Now, that I do believe is from the helpers, because they have charges. However, I can't guarantee that Skill Measurement Coon won't do something too, so keep that in mind. Here's where the very important trick comes in. Skill Measurement Chan A, if you attack it, then it will give Vigor. And that's to you. And version B will give counterattack, which is basically a pride buff. This is the big mechanic behind this fight, because you will get these buffs to really help your damage output. So you're going to want to hit these guys for those buffs. You want to start off with the Vigor one, so start hitting A with that buff. for the Vigor buff. And then as your HP starts dropping, the counterattack, which is basically Pride, starts coming in even better. Because, of course, Vigor stops working completely when your HP hits half. So, that's something to keep in mind. So, my general suggestion, Vigor is probably most helpful when you're sitting at most of your HP. I would say at least 75%. So, you have to pay very close attention to your own HP gauges. And then that's when the Pride one starts coming in. If you have any area of effect damage nukes, it will probably activate both of these. I don't know if it's going to do it off of your burst, but it will definitely do it off of ability damage. So keep that one thing in mind. You're going to want to hit them, get buffs, so you can start doing even more damage. That is the biggest mechanic in this fight. So despite the fact that they do not count towards the score directly, they will indirectly count because they're buffing you. So you're going to want to hit them, and you're going to want to get these buffs. Quite frankly, some weapon grids are probably packing a lot of vigor anyways. This is probably your chance to actually overcap it. And what that means is that you have more than 100% vigor, so that means even if your HP drops a little bit, you might still get the full 100% effect. Because normally you lose some vigor the minute your HP drops. But if you overcap it, that may not be the case. And for anybody that's running off of a Pride setup, that's going to really get spiked with the buff right here as well. So this is a good time to actually test out quite a few mechanics. You're going to want to try and get used to Vigor because it counts in another multiplier. You want to get used to Pride to see how far you can push your teams with lower HP amounts. You're going to want to attack with Advantage Element because you don't want your damage to drop by 90%. You're going to want to not use certain debuffs because they won't work. You probably need to bring the you will need to bring the defense down. You might or might not need to bring attack based debuffs, because you will want to hit skill measurement Kun with complete full as much as you can defense down, so you can maximize your damage. 50% defense down is essentially dealing double damage to that enemy. So if you can get it with elemental debuffs or defense debuffs, that's the way to go. This is the time to get used to a lot of different stuff, because this is definitely the point in the game where things are starting to shift. It is, as far as I can tell, turning into an era where you want to play with advantage, and then on top of that, you don't want to rely on every debuff you can get your hands on. You only want to rely on specific ones if necessary. So this is definitely the time to start paying attention to that. And then for those of you that never had Vigor, well, here's your chance to test it out a little bit. But anyways, that's all for that. Now, keep in mind, this list might be a little bit different because it may or may not change between the different Kuns. But needless to say, you can still get guild medals no matter what you do. You can get stuff to help you out, like those books for break limiting and S-Class souls. You can get Dragonic Eye Shards. You can get gotcha tickets. You're going to want to get all this stuff from this list, because this is a cumulative score list. And that means that regardless of what your best score is, your run will add to that total. So if you did like 1 million and quit, you still got 1 million. If you did, say, 20 million on one run and did 15 million on another, that's 35 million towards the entire thing, but your best score is 20 million. And last but not least, too, is a ranking reward. And well, it's different between the different servers, I've found out. So you just have to look and see. But simply put, the better your rank, the more guild medals you'll get. And you want those guild medals because of the fact that you want to trade for the SSR break limit item for Eidolons, which is the Imperial Chaldea, I do believe it's called. You want that Chaldea because of the fact that it is one of the few ways of getting that thing for free. Do not trade for anything else or you are scamming yourself. And the same goes for Tower of Malice, where you want that SSR break limit item for weapons. That means that you should trade nothing but 15,000 metal trades from guild competitions and 10,000 metal trades from Tower. Do not be tempted by anything else or you are just making things harder for yourself. That is the best way I can really put it. All the other stuff that is on those lists, you can get them anywhere else, period, point blank, including gacha tickets. There are so many epic quests that give you gacha tickets right now. But anyways, that's all for this. More of this is going to come soon because now that it's every single element, I have to try and get my best runs with all my teams. So you might actually see more videos of this thing than normal. Before I used to run it with just my best team and just show one video, which was always light. Now I have to show different setups I try to come up with on other elements. And since this is a competition type thing too, there's likely people that's going to do better than me because I don't have the best in every single element. But I do try to rank as high as possible in these things because I want those break limit items for Eidolons as well. Anybody probably does. So that said, you'll see videos on this, most likely more than one, but I can't guarantee all 6 elements just yet. I'll have to try things and see. But anyways, that's all for this. More of this will come soon. And once again, double check in-game news and see what's changed for that stuff because there is quite a lot of shop changes they mentioned. You're going to want to double check things and get what you can because some of that stuff is not going to stay. More so, you will absolutely want to test this guild competition out even if you do not plan on ranking because there are going to be some mechanics that will become permanent content later on. So pay very close attention to that. But anyways, that's all for now, guys. More of this will come soon, and take care.